Hey, good evening, Galleon. This is Mayor Tom O'Leary back on November 9th. A lot has changed in a week. I want to start out by congratulating the schools, both the students who've been participating in extracurriculars at the state level for the last couple of weeks, but I think overall for the support of the community, the success of the school levy, I think that's while it's certainly good for the school district itself, it's also somewhat an indicator of how positive and how supportive the community is as a whole. And it's always a good sign when particularly a renewal like that breezes through as well as it did in an election that was certainly sort of a crazy record turnout. Along with that, there's been a little bit of discussion about, and I want to address a couple of issues that have to do with the CARES Act funding. Those folks who have read or participated at all in any Facebook comments about how the CARES Act money should be distributed, I think there's been a fair amount of that discussion, and I never regretted Bill Comerford's departure from city government as much as when I read his comments about the utility credit program. And I just wanted to say, through this medium, it's Bill, that you were right on about that in terms of what we're trying to do to benefit as many people as possible. I think where Bill was particularly on point was how he was describing how that we're implementing the legislation that the General Assembly gave us, which was their interpretation of what Congress had passed. So we had quite a few restrictions, limitations, and some of the commentary had used verbs like that seniors and others were excluded from the program. That's really an unfair, almost counterproductive way to interpret that. And what we've tried to do is thread the needle, so to speak, trying to meet the federal requirements, the state requirements. And so all utility customers got their bill over the weekend. That's never a great event in the life of a Galleon City resident, but in that was a letter that described, by using the language of the legislation specifically, who's qualified technically for that credit. I would say from the city's point of view, our focus is going to be on processing those credit requests rather than perhaps focusing on making sure that each person that made a statement of being adversely affected by COVID financially, our focus is to get those credits applied versus being trying to audit and make sure that every one of those requests specifically meets that. So that's about all I'm going to say about that. There's been a little bit of a suggestion. I'm not sure who all takes those kind of critics seriously anymore, but that there was some sort of deception and some attempt to sort of hide from people the fact that they may not be eligible for the credit. So sort of a bait and switch argument. Nothing could be further from the truth. Let's just move on after this by saying that what council and myself, what we tried to do is come up with a efficient way to distribute those funds within the time frame, which is by the end of the year, to as many people as possible. And so while some folks may feel like they're excluded, my recommendation is if you've been adversely financially affected by COVID, then you've got that in your letter, in your bill. Sign it, mail it in, bring it into the billing office, and we'll see how those credits process. So there's maybe it's just the nature of social media that there's a bit of an alarmist character to it, but our goal is to get the money out to as many of our customers as possible. Certainly they should qualify, and I guess maybe that's more than I need to say about that. I don't want to drone on and on about it, but if you feel like you've been hurt by the COVID crisis financially, mail that in and take your chances, and we'll see what happens over the next couple of weeks. Okay. I've got those items. You got anything?
Yeah, first question tonight
Sure.
came from Brian.
Mm-hmm.
He asked, is the city still picking up leaves? Seems like there's still quite a lot that need removed.
Yes, and I think it's a matter of where you are in the city. I know over by where I live, they've been real good about getting them picked up. Now, I say that, of course, facetiously. I think we're getting to the point where I'm not sure Brian, is that who? I'm not sure where Brian lives, but one of the things that we get to at this part of the pickup season is we find people who call in here and let us know where they're at, and maybe there's a whole block or two of folks that have raked their leaves out, and then we pass that word along. So the number's 468-1857, and then hit number 1 when you get to that prompt. That'll get you to the mayor's office, and we'll try to get that then passed out to the service director, or the service department staff through the service director. So yeah, we're out there. We got a few more days. In fact, the weather, last time I said that, I'm not even gonna complete the thought. Last time I talked about how wonderful the weather was, we had about 5 or 6 days of crappy weather. So I think it looks like we're gonna be in the leaf collection business for another 8 or 10 days, and that should get us wrapped up. So let us know if you aren't getting them picked up, you haven't seen the trucks. They've been around because this time of year I spent a lot of time out in the communities trying to assess things like whether the paving got done on time, and I have to say I'm really pleased with the contractor, Shelley and Sands. You've always got a little corrective work, but the local paving work, I know some folks were a little anxious about the fact they'd milled off some of these real bad sections, and they'd gone from bad to even worse. But some of those primary side streets now have been resurfaced, and it does make a world of difference, and glad to get that completed. So anyway, that's what I have on that. Got any more questions?
Well, just one more thought on leaf collection before we move on. Josh pointed out we need to remind people not to put the leaves out in the street.
Yeah, I think the Devil's Strip, I don't know if that's Josh that works for the city, but we do have a couple Joshes. That would be funny if I think once they're out in the street, it presents a problem for all kinds of situations. That's how they end up in the storm sewer. That's also makes them slippery for bicyclists and other people. So, yep. And I think also be mindful of parking in front of a big pile. It's kind of hard to get at that. I know that sounds silly. I don't mean it to be, silly or picking on people, but we'll sometimes get that you need to come and pick up the leaves. We send a crew out, and there's 3 or 4 cars parked there, and kind of hard to get at them. So I would want to point that out.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. A couple other questions so far. This next one came from Becky. When is the next Parks and Recreation meeting?
I think that was scheduled to be the 11th, and I'm not sure, to be honest with you, when that's rescheduled. So we'll try to get that posted, and perhaps my failure to answer will get Councilman Ivy or somebody else on that committee to send us a message or enlighten us on it. This is the time where major projects or initiatives that would happen in 21 really get on the drawing board, get under consideration initially to be costed out, if you will. So
Okay. We also had Don and Cindy both comment. They were sorry to hear about the resignation for Brian Trish.
Yeah, I was going to finish with that, but maybe I will finish with that if there are any more questions. That was the we were talking a little bit before. Brian had a bit of a medical issue, which I think was the primary reason that he decided to resign when he did. Without getting into too much of his decision making, I really had the strong feeling that Brian wasn't going to run for re-election. And so we had had some conversations about how things were back in 2013 when we both started, and how no one would argue that things are perfect. I think I feel really good in terms of working with Brian insofar as exceeding a lot of people's expectations about how well this mayor, auditor, statutory form of government would work. I know this goes back a ways to 13, but there was some sort of word on the street, some conversations, if you will, about how close we were to getting out of fiscal emergency. Heck, I swallowed that bait. Little did I realize until we were elected and got into office how many things needed to be done, both from an administrative process point of view. I might describe them as picky details, but they're important details. But also from the point of view of getting the finances really squared away and in a situation or a condition that the state was comfortable with our current financial situation and then our ability to manage going forward. Some people thought that was just going to happen overnight, and that certainly didn't. And it really took years of work on behalf of Brian and his staff, plural, because there's been a couple sets of staff there. But I think there's definitely an aspect of job well done. Many of the things that I think we set out to accomplish in 13, Brian's helped get done. And I think it applies to everybody who runs for elective office. There's the right time to get in, there's the right time to contribute, and then everyone has to consider, whether or not, how they continue to go on. So, I joined Cindy and Dawn and other people, at the, sort of a genuine thanks to Brian for doing the job he did. And as far as turning the page there, I think the way it sets now, the compensation may be a factor to some people. In conversation here at City Hall, if you don't want to do public service, there's not enough money in the world to make it worth it to somebody who doesn't want to serve the community. And there's also at the other end quite a bit of truth too. There's 40 grand or 39.9 as the salary is really not a lot for younger persons, younger professionals, but I think it's fair given where the community's at, and it really would be up to council to make a decision about changing compensation. My focus is going to be on finding somebody who wants to serve the public, and then secondarily somebody who is interested in running for re-election in 2021. So, that's kind of will be the priorities, and I think there's a high likelihood that we'll have somebody in place at least several days before Brian leaves on the 27th. So that's kind of an update on that, and I appreciate those people commenting on his term. Last thing I'd say about that, we were talking the other day again on different aspects. Brian was pointing out that it has been, and this will really, the people who watch this have been, who in the heck is Gloyd Fry? I think our audience, if you will, may be a little bit older with some groups, but But we don't do a lot of demographics. We're not trolling after you. We're going to sell you a bumper sticker or a button. We may sell you a yard sign here next year, but in any event, Brian had been financial officer, auditor in this case, for as long as anyone since Gloyd Fry. So you'll have to really test your memory, the old Galleonites, to kind of go through the sequence of people who have served as chief financial officer or auditor, and then finance director, and now auditor again. And his tenure, if you will, is as long as anyone since Gloyd Fry. So anyway, if you want to get a cup of coffee, you may be able to win that on a bet uptown. Who is the longest tenured financial officer in Galleon in the last 30, 40 years, 50 years. So anyways, congratulations. I still see, I'll get off of Brian's back after this, but I still see him working, cleaning windows and working around the house. And I keep saying, man, you get to a certain age, you need to rent that out or take it easy. So he won't listen to me. He rarely does, but we want to congratulate him on his retirement. All right, so I blathered on. We got anything else?
Yeah, a couple more
Good.
questions came in. This next one came from Emily. She asked, is there video surveillance at the new playground in Hayes Park, and are we allowed to know the location?
No and yes. I mean, yes and no. Yes, there is surveillance, and no. It's not the complete installation, if you will. We have some surveillance cameras down there, and probably don't, would in some people's minds defeat the purpose of it. But nope, there isn't, and I think that's going to be standard. We had, where's that bathroom tour? Oh, out in Amons. It's kind of a nice facility. I wouldn't want to recommend the bathrooms for a week or two, or maybe till next spring, because we had, just an embarrassingly high level of vandalism and violence out there. Not violence, that's no word. Vandalism out there over the weekend. It just makes you shake your heads. Stuff that takes a while to accomplish, like ripping the mirrors off the wall, and it appeared like somebody was trying to, I guess it's some sort of show of manhood, but they were trying to rip the toilet out of that bathroom. I was like, come on. Go find something else to do. I don't know why you want to ruin our property. So the connection between those two is that one of the likely projects for freeze funding next year will be wherever we have an investment of taxpayer freeze money in a parks, one can expect the camera to be up. And I used to not want to have Big Brother watching. I've gotten rid of all of those 60 and 70 libertarian tendencies. We're going to protect our property, and those vandals beware. So, anyways, I don't want to get going on that. It actually settled down quite a bit, and I had a constructive day at the middle school, because that's where some of the clash between the teenage kids and the little kids and their parents was getting a little bit heated about what the city could do to provide things that people from, let's say, 13 to 16, 13 to 17, the kind of things that they could do in the park that make sense and are fun for them. And so we've got a few of those ideas in the hopper, and we'll be continuing to work on those. I'd say some of it might be Wi-Fi, and then a connection with the schools. There are other communities that have done things with organized gaming, and a lot of the kids who don't go out for the band or who aren't involved in sports as extracurriculars, those kids said, we know other schools, other towns that have sort of competitive gaming leagues or gaming teams. So that's the kind of thing that for somebody my age doesn't make a lot of sense, but that's why it's important to let the young kids tell you what they want in the parks and not build a shuffleboard court or something for the old timers. So, in any event, um, the vandalism goes on a little bit, and yes, back to Emily's original question, we do have a camera, and will be more fully installed by the spring. Fair enough? What
Yep.
else we got?
All right, thank you. Next question tonight came from Cindy. Will there be a Christmas tree on the square this year?
Yes, and I think people who have, in different roles or positions, have had a part of Come Home to Galleon. I think it's one of those things where folks who have been involved, and I've had a small part to play, but been part of an organization that has been been a key sponsor of the activity. Anyway, I think no one wants to throw in the towel, but it's my guess that the lead organizations and that really the lead individuals are going to set a narrowed scope, and maybe something as simple as lighting of the tree, but we'll have the big three of social distancing and masks, and I don't know, what's the other big three? If you're sick, stay home. How's that for a big three? But my guess is that yes, we'll have a tree. I'm not sure how much of those things that we've come to see almost as traditions, the Santa breakfast, the trolley, the movie theater, those things, they'll probably be scaled back. But I'd stay tuned through the chamber and that organization that sponsors that. They have their own website, don't they?
Come Home to Galleon.
Yeah. So we'll bug them a little bit. We generally meet with the chamber on Wednesdays. That's off because of Veterans Day, but we'll try to get that defined, play a role in that. I mean, it is important because we provide stuff for the parade, meaning cruisers and fire trucks, but we also provide the traffic control. So it's getting to the time where we need to, if there's going to be something more than a simple tree lighting and a few carols sung by those assembled, we'll try to let people know.
Okay.
It's a real mystery how you get your tree selected. I think this one, I'm not sure, but I've got a candidate, had a chance to marry a nice couple out on Charles Street. Gosh, it seems like 3 or 4 weeks ago. And they had they have a really pretty blue spruce. It's not maybe as tall as some of our historically awesome trees, but it's a beautiful tree. So we've got that one in the hopper for a volunteer. But there are usually a few candidate trees, so we'll see how that goes. And I have every expectation, back to the original question, that we'll have a Christmas tree and have it lit. We'll see what else can be pulled together.
Okay. Next question tonight came from John. He asked, when is the groundbreaking for the athletic center?
I'd say that the soonest that you would see that would be spring of next year. But there are a couple of main decision points that are going to have to be arrived at. Those include, right now the Port Authority is working on selecting a contract designer to do that, and then arriving at a final price. And those are two big issues: who's going to build it, and what's it going to cost. And then right on the heels of that will be the need to lock in city support for whatever the cost is and whatever the recommended funding plan is. And then the next step would be to go to the Freeze Foundation and get their endorsement of that, whatever that formula is. I've taken the time to be part of a lot of the meetings in terms of filtering through construction firms and architecture firms that have teamed up to offer proposals. I'd say generally that they're a little bit more than some of the prices that I may be responsible for. You know, the $6 million number, that is, all of the quotes are significantly higher than that. And so I'd have to, you know, be in full disclosure, we're gonna have to look to find a balance between what we can, everything that we know we want or we believe we need and what we can afford. And so it's, I think those, back to the original question, those are important decisions that will be made before we get to a groundbreaking. But at the same token, I think it's moving forward, and everything in life worth having requires sacrifice and often costs more than what you think when you first start out on that effort to get something this big, potentially this having this big an impact, getting that launched and getting it done. So.
Okay, a couple more questions
Sure.
came in here. Next one came from Jim. He asked, what is the penalty for illegal dumping in park trash dumpsters?
Gosh, that's a good question.
I was actually looking that up,
Mhm.
and I found the section of the ordinances that it's in, but not what the penalty is, Jim.
Yeah, it's we're getting right to the end of the year. We lock down most of those dumpsters during the winter and have them removed during the winter. It's I don't know. I would say did you find the number?
Yep, looks like they are fined $1,000 per offense.
Yeah, I think that then becomes probably an enforcement issue. What we've done is to separate. There used to be the health department and the building inspector had dual responsibility on nuisance or that kind of dumping, that kind of failure to remove trash. I take from the question though that we ought to look at some enforcement on that. I know on Mondays, Tuesdays after the weekend, it's kind of ridiculous. But it's a matter of going through the garbage, seeing who's doing it, and then prosecuting it. So we've been probably laid back about that. I know there was a call and a discussion about that this morning about how long we're going to keep the dumpster out at Amon's. It's really out at Amix, I think, where we have the most abuse on the Amix side. But that seems to be a favorite spot. So this weekend, maybe the same people who tore up the bathroom then used us for their garbage service.
Okay, thanks, Mayor. Last item I had for the night came from Julie, and she wants us to tear down the former car wash down here on East Street.
Yeah, I think I'm sure you'd find a lot of people that go along with that. I'm not sure. One of the issues is there's no apparent reuse for that. I believe, although it's easy for any of us to check, I believe the owner remains probably current on taxes. And I do know from a vegetation enforcement, weeds growing, that kind of stuff, you know, I don't want to be too harsh, but you know, we've contacted them in the past. I don't want to say they're the usual suspects, but we've been doing enforcement there. I don't know, Julie, as long as they pay their taxes, I'm not sure there's a whole lot that we can do with that. You know, one of the remedies, and I'm not trying to be snotty about this, is one of the remedies where we have these unsightly properties is to purchase them from the owners. And it can be I'm not saying an individual resident or tax or citizen needs to do that. But when you look at the relative priority that some of these, the relative priority that demolishing commercial or derelict, if you will, residential and other properties, one of the key ingredients that's missing is no money to do that. And we're just entering into the budget process. It's going to be compressed a little bit this year. It seems like it's always compressed, but we would really like to get a first version of the 2021 budget in front of council before Brian resigns on the 27th. But one of the things that would be new to the budget this year, for next year, would be a recommendation to put some money into some demolition. So working back to that original question, by some formula, by some decision-making process, that car wash may turn out to be a piece of property that people within city government would decide needs to be acquired and demolished, and through that process, we could use city funds to clean up some of these least maintained, most abandoned buildings. So I don't know if there's still a gang of people listening, or a few people listening. That'll probably cause a discussion to ensue, and that's kind of how I answered that question that way. It is the way I did, is that if we put city dollars to that, there's a number of properties, including the one that she identified, that could be cleaned up. What they would be reused for, that remains an open question, but their current conditions, not just that building, but other buildings around town, it's kind of rough. So.
The last question I had tonight came from Jim, and entirely different topic. Will there be a hockey rink this winter?
Yeah, if we get our act together sooner, Jim, this year, I can't even remember. I'll make up some excuse. I don't remember it. That's my excuse. It got up late. I believe, if I recall, it didn't get cold until kind of late. And so it got up late, and we got very little use out of it. So the short answer to the question is yes, we fully intend to. And thanks for reminding us. We'll put that on the list for the service department / parks department / street department / utility maintenance department. Well, we'll get those guys working on that. It's pretty slick, recreational, and relatively inexpensive. I think the key is to get it up in advance of the cold weather, and then hope Mother Nature cooperates. So, anyways, about the world's, any other questions?
I do have a
Oh, yeah,
one
please,
here
please.
from
Yeah,
Cindy.
yeah.
Are there any plans for the former Firelands building on Harding West?
Well, the same answer in short form applies to that building that probably does to the car wash. We make a decision about which buildings. I mean, I think that has some reuse potential, the one that was just mentioned. But so ignite a whole bunch of other stuff about regulating those properties, because we had that discussion about 6 months ago. I'm probably more of a private property, let's coach them along, than I am acquiring it, taking it from them, and trying to reuse it. We have a handful of buildings. I'll change the subject on you, Cindy. We have a handful of buildings from Union to Liberty that are in increasingly rough shape and need some attention from the city or from leadership in the community. The uptown area, we've got some buildings with great potential that historically had been a lot more productive, that something needs to be done about. And so I think that's an objective or a goal of mine next year, is to try to bring some coordination, some direction to the uptown area. But just 2 blocks to the west, where you're pointing out that the building, the old Firelands, is, you can make the case that it needs that same sort of attention. And I'm not sure, when you set boundaries along Harding Way, where you start and where you stop. I think the entire Main Street, if you will, needs some time spent thinking through how we use that in the short term, and then how we plan for a long-term future for Uptown Galleon. So, sounds almost like a campaign speech. You know, you go to those campaign things, they have that green and yellow and red light, and once it goes yellow, you have to wrap it up into a quick answer. So I struggle with that, folks, trying to get that quick answer up before the red light comes on. So, anyways, we got anything else?
Nope, that was it.
No rhyme or reason to this, folks. Last week I was here, I was all ready to answer a bunch of questions, didn't have any. Tonight, I appreciate the interaction with folks. The biggest thing, if you want to tune into a uneventful council meeting, tomorrow night's your choice, or your chance rather. There's one small issue on rezoning, what most people would recognize as the former Wesley Chapel. There'll be a public hearing, and then that ordinance, that's it. Again, Wednesday's a holiday. I think for those people who follow city government, what I'd keep an eye on and is over the next several days, you'll see the first iteration of the budget. I think you'll see a committee meeting or two added sometime between now and what I guess is the 27th. Is that when the next council meeting is?
Correct.
No, the 27th is Friday. That's the last day, Brian's last day. 24th, I guess it is. So on the 24th, between tomorrow and the 24th, my guess is there'll be some Zoom meetings that you can tune into that will get into the sometimes bone grinding detail of the 2021 budget. And so that's the next big activity at City Hall. And, you know, the budget time is never easy, but I think I'm fairly encouraged about it. There will be some adjustments in water and sewer rates next year. We're trying to think through what's the best way to accomplish that. But beyond that, I think much of what we've seen will be what will continue to happen in terms of level of police and fire and other key services. So, all right, I don't want to drone on and on, but if you're a budget hawk or a budget dove, or you just like to you like to see how your tax money is being spent, the next couple of weeks, committee meetings, Zoom meetings, will be the best way to be right on top of that. So, all right, with that all that being said, on with the show. And you know, Brian, congratulations on a job well done, and you know, we'll try to wrap things up for 2021 before you finish up at the end of the month. Good night.